Story 1. I had to defend my thesis over Zoom, and many professors joined the call to watch. My thesis was about immune response in fish to parasites. One professor joined late and forgot to mute her microphone, and we got treated to this little gem. Shoo. Mommy is learning about fish parasites, which is what you'll get if you don't stop peeing in the koi pond. Edit. Thanks for the acknowledgement. That's my first recognition. Story 2. Not really anything super weird. I was in a meeting with my class for the first day of school, and I had forgotten to mute myself. I then proceeded to start noisily baby talking to my cat, who was in my lap at the time. Embarrassing. Story 3. A girl's mom. Who are you on the computer for this early in the morning? And asking the same thing over and over. Teacher, I think your microphone is on. Story 4. English Zoom call. The teacher was holding us for more than 15 minutes after the period had ended. She said something like, "Keep working hard." And I responded with, "If she says hard one more time, I'm going to flip a table." I was not on mute. Story 5. When I was doing an online algebra camp, the teacher forgot to turn off his microphone while we were supposed to be doing some problems. He said, "I really hate math." Story 6. This is from a couple of years ago. I was working for a private college that has several campuses. My campus was the online campus. Each year, the campuses took turns hosting an annual writing conference for English and speech faculty. With it being the online campus's turn to host, we came up with the idea to make it a virtual conference, which faculty members could attend from home or go to their own campus and attend with their peers in a classroom. Anyway, as one of the people on the conference committee, my job was to host several of the various breakout sessions, make sure the WebEx meeting was working, introduce the presenter of the session, monitor the question and answer, and so on. I also made sure to mute the participants once it was time for the speaker to start. There was no live microphone scenario, but one of the participants left his webcam on. During the presentation, he pulled out a gigantic party sub and was just going to town on it. So while everyone was watching the presenter's PowerPoint, you just saw this guy, who I had met before and was a legit 6 feet 8 inches, scarfing down a party sub in a window at the bottom of the screen. Honestly, it was more impressive than anything. Story 7. So I have one. I just did 8-hour Zoom calls for 7 weeks training for a new project. On the second week, a man unmutes his call, farts the longest fart I've ever heard in my life, then when he finishes, mutes the call. I can see others laughing while muted at his fatal error of thinking he wasn't muted, and so he went to mute his call. I found this to be the highlight of the week, but the following week, the guy does it again. Honestly, the second time I laughed, but then started to wonder if it was some kind of power move. Story 8. In a math class I was in last year, we were taking a test which you have to turn your microphone on for their way of trying to prevent cheating. Some girl apparently forgot that hers was on and started belting out, "Stand By You" by Rachel Platten at the top of her lungs. It went on for the entire song, and she was still humming it when I finished the test and left the call. Story 9. I teach for an online university that requires me to conduct a weekly live session. One morning, I was lecturing, and a student popped in late. I said, "Hello, student name. Thanks for joining us." She said, "Don't say my name," just before she realized her microphone was on and turned it off. I just laughed. Story 10. I was producing a video for some university professors on a specific medical topic for a virtual learning course. I was all set up to shoot the process, and the teachers excused themselves to the next office to regroup and have a chat. I already had their wireless lavalier microphones attached and fed to my camera, so when I sat down at the camera and put on my headphones, I immediately heard their conversation. They were criticizing me, saying they couldn't believe they hired someone so young, inexperienced in that particular medical field, how I looked, how I asked questions, and so on. Oops. At least I made them a fine video. These days, I don't put my headphones on until we're about to shoot. Story 11. Last week, a kid in my brother's class forgot his camera was on during the first class and was smoking a giant gas mask bong during the syllabus review. Story 12. Ironically, my information technology teacher forgot to turn off his microphone and camera and proceeded to get into a very heated argument on the phone with his ex-girlfriend, with whom he has a child. Did I mention that she is also a teacher at our school? Yeah, most awkward 5 minutes of my life before he realized. Story 13. During my English class, this one girl forgot to mute herself. While my teacher was talking, she almost deafened all of us on the Zoom call answering her mother's questions. Her mother, from a distance, asked, "What class are you in?" She yelled, "English." Her mother replied, "Oh, the hot teacher?" She said, "Yeah, that guy." Now, even I'll admit my teacher is fairly attractive, but it does take it to another level when you get your own mother involved. Thankfully, our teacher is a chill guy and thought the whole thing was just kind of funny, and gave a general reminder to the class to keep mics muted. She didn't say anything for the rest of the class. Story 14. In a thermodynamics class, one of the students said, "Holy smokes, this is so much," after covering a large set of equations related to fugacity. Everyone found it relatable. Story 15. A student in my class forgot to turn off their microphone, and we heard some background noises like doors closing and tapping. Due to a display bug, we couldn't see where the noise was coming from. Then the student started saying negative things about the teacher, commenting on how the lesson was useless and how they could do the same thing on a tablet. Everyone heard that, and the teacher heard the insults. The student didn't return to the classes after that. Story 16. I was in training before classes started this year. Around 200 teachers were present. Only the principal and assistant principal were speaking. A teacher had her microphone unmuted. Her phone rang. She picked it up and said, "Hey, yeah, just sitting here in another one of these goddamn trainings." Story 17. I'm a college student. Last semester, we had a girl place an entire dinner order over the phone with her microphone on while we all tried to tell her that her microphone was on. I think she had us muted. She was ordering Mediterranean food. I think she got a chicken gyro. Edit. Thanks for the upvotes. I feel like I ought to mention she was also yelling across the house to ask her mom what she wanted from wherever they were ordering. Sadly, we didn't get to hear the mom's order. Story 18. Somebody in my class forgot to turn off the microphone and started singing along loudly to a song. Somebody told her, and there was this odd whoop noise, and then she cut off. Story 19. I am not a student, but work in the technology industry. I have been in meetings where people forget to mute themselves on large company calls with hundreds or thousands of attendees, and we will hear a fart and then a toilet flush. That is about as interesting as these meetings get, though. Story 20. I had a student's boyfriend, both in college, walk up behind her on Zoom, reach into her shirt, pull out her breasts, and start doing a little dance. She was just laughing and playfully slapping his hands away. This was probably 30 seconds after I had just gone through my whole speech about making sure there was nothing in your browser history, Google search history, or names of folders that could be embarrassing or offensive. Story 21. College student here. This was last semester when we had first switched to all online classes. I had an 8 a.m. class on Renaissance through modern art history. Anyway, a kid in the class didn't have his microphone muted, and he was snoring. Like really snoring. My poor professor tried to wake him up but couldn't. She also had no idea how to mute him or remove him, so we went on with the lecture. After about 5 minutes, she finally said, "I can't teach to this," and ended the Zoom meeting. For the rest of the semester, we used VoiceThread instead. Story 22. Not a Zoom, but when I was a flight attendant, we used handheld microphones to give briefings and make announcements. One female passenger got in my friend's face and screamed at her that if her bags were lost or if her golf bag was damaged, she would make sure to hold her personally responsible. My friend was pretty shaken not only by the loudness and anger but by the woman's spittle and tried to hold it together to give her departure briefing. Welcome aboard Flight 123, service to Orlando. You awful person. The entire plane lost it. My friend had forgotten to let go of the key on the side of the microphone, so all noise was picked up. Story 23. A boy accidentally forgot to turn his microphone off, and we heard how his mom verbally abused him. He then looked at the camera, realized the microphone was on, and turned the camera and mic off. The next day, he looked like he had cried all day, and his mom was behind the camera. I still feel bad for that kid. To the random Redditor who gave me the silver award, I swear the situation will not be kept secret. I will do as much as I can to help. Guess what? My whole class was telling and spamming the principal to do something about the kid. In the end, the principal, along with the counselor, had a long talk with the mother and threatened that if she didn't change, they would call the police. She was scared and decided to change because his dad loves him. The last day I saw him, he was happy and like he was on the first day again. Though I couldn't speak to him, it's clear that at least something changed and his father is on his side. To all of you who supported the situation, thanks for giving advice on what to do. Story 24. My son calls his tablet his fix because when I first got it and the battery would die, I would tell him I was going to fix it. So imagine his pre-kindergarten teacher's surprise last spring when he asked me if he could have his fix now that he was done with school. I laughed, held up the tablet in question, and explained what he meant. Story 25. This was work, not school, but someone posted a drawing of a Hello Kitty type character on the side of their presentation during a virtual meeting. One of my coworkers mumbled, "Damn, fat ass." Which, when I looked again, yeah, the character had a pear body shape. It was such a weird thing for someone to say, though my brain just dismissed it as me mishearing it until they panicked a second later and apologized for not being on mute, and then I fully processed it. Additional context. The coworker is a 50-plus mother of 3. Story 26. It isn't too bad, but during the graduating ceremony for a class, all staff were asked to attend and turn on their microphones to clap at certain points so it wouldn't be awkward. One such staff member forgot to turn their microphone back off and was heard loudly jokingly insulting her husband and asking for another drink while complaining about how long and boring this was. This was broadcast to the whole class, their parents, and anyone else listening. We stuck together and didn't tell anyone who it was, but we all knew. Mute your microphones. Edit. Changed berating to more what it actually was. Maybe I used the word wrong, but we're in the United Kingdom and that's how we show love. I heard what she was saying, guys. It wasn't abuse. Story 27. One time in an art class, separate from my school, my dad knocked on my door. It was silent at that point. Everyone was working on their projects. I clicked the mute button and yelled, "What?" Turned out my microphone was already muted, and I turned it on. I startled the entire class, and the teacher asked if I was okay. Edit. I know everyone hates these, but what in the world? I was not expecting this to happen, and I got my first award. Thank you. Story 28. Not virtual, but a few years back my roommate was in a chemistry lecture, and the professor excused himself and left the room but left the wireless microphone on. He proceeded to fart and came back into the lecture hall to see all his students dying of laughter. Story 29. So we were making our classes as phone calls on an app called TeamSpeak, I think. Anyways, I was using my phone to talk and my computer to work and sometimes check Discord. At a point, we were supposed to do some exercises on our own, and I left my mic on. My friend sent me a message talking about the fact that he got a girlfriend. So I sent him, "You did it, you crazy son of a bitch." Then I wanted to add some emoji, so I tried to edit the message and I hit the text-to-speech button instead. The computer literally yelled, "You crazy son of a bitch." Story 30. I was visiting my best friend during a lecture, and she had her microphone and video turned off. She then had to join a group discussion and sometimes unmuted herself to contribute. After that, the whole class was supposed to present their results, and she supposedly muted herself again. I started venting to her about how wasps are considered wild bees, even though they have no business being bees because they're troublemakers, and suddenly we heard laughter from her professor and classmates. She forgot to mute herself. Story 31. I know it isn't close to answering the question, but I have to share this. We recently had a meeting with our whole team where the host forgot to turn off screen sharing, so we all saw him respond positively to a job offer. Funniest thing I've ever seen. Or it would be if the offer hadn't included the salary, letting us all know that this grossly incompetent worker was getting paid way more than the rest of us. Still, we were just glad to see him go. Story 32. This was a conference call for work, but it was a big call with about 12 people. Since I am new, I was mostly just listening as the senior analysts were discussing something. The call was going on for a while, so I took my laptop into the bathroom with me. I flushed the toilet, and everyone just stopped talking. It turns out I didn't mute my microphone, and everyone heard a toilet flushing in the middle of the meeting. Luckily, no one cared, and they all laughed about it, but I was mortified. Story 33. While giving a lecture on the heated arguments among different schools of psychology, our professor screamed, "Fire! Fire! There's fire!" And most of the confused students, including the teacher's pets, replied, "I agree. Those were some good points." Things turned out funnier and scarier when the professor continued screaming, and we could hear her calling her house help and brother, alarming them of a fire sparking up her switchboard. So, a confused, concerned class of 50 sat through the entire episode of putting out the fire, while our professor revealed every dynamic of her family through her panicked screams. 30 minutes later, she came back to her laptop to unmute herself only to find 100, "Are you okay?" texts in the chat box. Edit. Thanks for making this new Reddit user's day with that award.